Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the third day of the PDG annual meeting. My name is Tammy Proctor, and I just would like to welcome you guys to our third day of meeting. I'm hoping that the day one and day two really met your expectations and that you were able to gather lots of insight and information on the priorities of the departments and also in your states. As we heard, lots of good information around the workforce and also around equity. Today, we're going to focus on sustainability. And we're hoping that today will be just as fulfilling for everyone, and you'll be able to gather information that you could spark your interest, take to your state teams, and be able to discuss some strategies for when you go back to your home states and begin to do your work. In a few minutes, you're going to hear from Katie Hamm, the Assistant Secretary of ACF, the Office of Early Childhood, and she's going to be sharing her thoughts about sustainability and talking about how you can use the PDG funds for slots. Katie will be followed by Lori Connors-Tadros, and many of you know Lori because she is part of the PDG TA Center, and she works with the National Institute for Early Education and Research. And Lori will be talking to you about blending and braiding as a sustainability strategy. Lori will be followed by, finally, Jamila Smith is the director of the Department of Education's Office of Innovation and Early Learning in the Office of Elementary and Secondary Education. And Jamila will share additional strategies for sustainability while identifying the Department's of Education's resources that might be used as a blending and braiding resource for funds. After Jamila speak, you will hear from Judy Willgren, who will facilitate our panel of 4 states who will speak on their efforts to increase access to high quality programs through slots, expansion, and sustainability. After a short break, you will hear from one more state before you move into your regional and state breakout rooms for the last time. However, we hope it won't be the last time that you will come together with your with your state colleagues to discuss these topics. Today, you will not return to the regional breakouts after your state time. Instead, after one additional break, you should go into the session go back into the session and join the session in the CVent that says your final session for the day. This will be the federal closing session. It is a Zoom meeting room, and you will be able to unmute yourselves and fully interact with the presenters. The federal closing session starts. Some of you will be asked to volunteer and share some of your highlights from your convening before the federal team shares some of their own thoughts about the convening, share a look ahead for the new year, and attempt to answer questions you may have about anything that you discussed during the convening, as well as topics not discussed. I will pass the mic to Katie Hamm, Deputy Assistant Secretary for ACF in the Office of Early Childhood Development. Katie?
Thank you so much, Tammy, and it's great to see all of you again. Thank you for sticking with us during this 3-day convening. I know we're here to talk today about sustainability, so I just wanted to share some thoughts on how we're working to make PDG more sustainable from the ACF perspective, and specifically hone in on how PDG funds can be used to support slots and support early childhood programs through subgrants. So as many of you know, the PDG statute provides the authority for grant recipients to use a portion of their PDG funds for slots. We have not seen that many states and territories have taken us up on that and used PDG dollars in this way. And what we'd heard is that part of the reason for that was concerns around sustainability and the reading of the statute that those renewal grants were only available for 3 years. we have been able to work internally and determine in collaboration with our Office of General Counsel that once a state or territory has 3 years of a renewal grant, they are able to come in and apply for a second planning grant. So you get your planning grant, you go through the 3 years of renewal, and then you're eligible to apply for a planning grant second time around, and then you can apply for another renewal grant. So it allows states and territories to be in more of a cycle where there can be a little bit more in the way of long-term planning. And we hope that part of that planning can be thinking about how you might fund slots for children birth to 5, and how you might think about supporting programs. We talked yesterday about equity, and we know that when it comes to equity, a big barrier to serving children, especially in low-income communities, is cost. So parents can't afford high tuition rates. Providers can't always afford to operate if they don't have investments. So those funds from CCDBG, whether in the form of supporting the child through a voucher or contracted slot, or supporting providers directly in enhancing quality, extending the day, defraying costs for parents, all of those things really support equity, and hopefully can be sustained a bit more and targeted a bit more with this interpretation of PDG that allows for continued support over time. And we know that PDG has been a very popular program. It's been a bipartisan program on the Hill. So we're really heartened to see that, and we hope that it means that you all can be thinking about longer term strategy for PDG and how you think about making those investments, providing more access to early care and education programs that we know are so valuable to children and families. As many of you probably know, this administration came in really proposing a large expansion of slots across childcare, across preschool programs, and making investments in Head Start. And when we haven't seen that large investment realized in Congress, we know that PDG is one of the tools that we have to support states and support territories that do wish to expand their slots and want to do so in a sustainable way. So I'd ask the team for just some time today to put a bug in your ear about sustainability and making sure that thinking about slots is one of the ways that you do that, and thinking about how to support a whole range of quality investments from workforce to longer programs defraying costs to the families by investing directly in programs. So I will stop there and just say I appreciate the creative spirit that you've brought to the challenges that we're all facing. I know that the opportunity to expand care and education with PDG money can be a real game changer in some states. So we're really looking forward to partnering alongside of you in all of the exciting projects that you have planned, addressing the continuing challenges that lie ahead. And I'm excited to engage in the ways that my colleagues on the panel are framing the opportunities, and grateful for the time with you all. So with that, I will turn it over to Lori Connors-Tadros to give our next presentation.
Thank you, Katie. I think that was actually exciting news. So I'm going to give you a question because I think it's going to be on everybody's mind and they won't be able to concentrate. Does that mean that there may be additional PDG renewal grant opportunities, 2024 plus?
So it is always on Congress to appropriate funding for programs, and that is true for Head Start. That's true for half of the Child Care and Development Block Grant, and it's true for PDG. So I can't say definitively what is going to be available in fiscal year 2023 or 2024, because we are still waiting on Congress to act, and that amount of money will determine the number of grants that we're able to make available. But what I'm saying is there is nothing that, assuming funds are available, there is nothing that would prevent us from, after a state has exhausted those 3 years of a renewal grant or territory, coming in and applying for another planning grant And in fact, that's an opportunity we made available this year with this round of grants to states that were exhausting those 3 years. And that as long as there's funding available, would make that opportunity available in the future as well.
Thank you. That's very reasonable and hopeful. So really appreciate that. And really my remarks today, I'm going to take a moment to share my screen, get my slides up. They're really going to build on what Katie has outlined and more or less given us a charge to do, is to think about both system building, which is part of the PDG kind of, goals of the grant. And as part of that is also, increasing access. So today I am going to talk about sustaining comprehensive early childhood systems. I know many of you were a part of our sustainability planning work group or have engaged with me around thinking strategically about financing as we seek to improve quality. There are, sustainability planning is, as the term says, is a very thoughtful, intentional process. Those of you I've interacted with know that I recommend an actual plan that takes you through a process that helps your team and the key leaders and parents and others engage in creating a common vision, identifying what result you expect to achieve for who, to think about financing strategically, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. Coordinating funds is one way, but raising new dollars is another way, or streamlining access is another way. Part of sustainability planning, and actually part of the work you all do, is garnering a broad base of community support, ensuring that folks from all walks of life understand the importance of providing access to quality early care and education that's affordable and that is paying providers a living wage and compensated adequately, and gaining those key champions. Those are the folks that help us kind of move the system forward in a state through the various ups and downs that state policy goes through. We all know quite well how to adapt to changing conditions. I know you all are kind of coming out of the pandemic, addressing, the real fissures in the systems that emerged during the pandemic and trying to kind of build back better. Even though we didn't get that federal legislation, it was the perfect term of what we're trying to do. Another very important piece, because of the accountability requirements and the audit requirements, is ensuring we have strong internal systems around accounting for dollars and really developing a plan. We have a lot of resources on the PDG-B5 TA website, and here's a link to a framework that actually Jamila will talk about, really emerged a number of years ago out of the Race to the Top challenge grants, both for early childhood and for K-12, and some work we did before. So this work around sustainability planning should really be part and parcel of the work that you're doing as a leadership team in your state. Okay, hold on one second. Why is that? Oh, there we go. So as I mentioned, states do take, within a framework, they take different approaches to sustainability planning, and I wanted to share with you a couple of approaches that states within our PDG-B5 family have taken. I saw Wendy Baker online, and Wendy shared this during the sustainability planning work group. This was the way Nebraska was looking at their, your PDG-B5 funded a set of projects and activities and initiatives, and really thinking through what's important about those, what have the direct impact on children and families, slots, as Katie mentioned, what might be an impact on a system like building out the data capacity, what might be an impact on equity like coordinated enrollment, what is the bang for the buck, meaning, you're going to get some quick results that you could then use to advocate for additional funding, or what might be something you didn't get to address yet that really needs to be funded. This is a framework or criteria by which you could think about rating your projects and approaching what you need to sustain and how much you need to raise to do so. Colorado reviewed their activities, thinking about what were, in a grant such as this capacity building, system building grant. There are some activities that really are intended to be either one time or take a significant upfront cost, like I'm going to just say building a website or parent portal, and then less money to maintain. So being thoughtful about going through that process to really understand what's a priority to be sustained and what's the level of funding to be sustained. Importantly, in Colorado's approach, I wanted to point out that really thinking through the FTEs that are required to support that work at the state level or community level, because this work does need some capacity to administer, ensure quality, monitor quality, and that kind of thing. And then Minnesota, they actually also went through a very intentional process. It resulted in a planning guide. You have to, click down into the renewal grant overview, and you will find the actual guide with a lot of detail about their process. Very, very informative. And these were the questions they asked themselves. So as I move into getting into some of the specific strategies around coordinating funding, I wanted to present an overview of an approach to sustainability planning, helping you to have a set of tools, resources, guiding questions to be intentional about this process. It's very important. The concerns are real, as Katie mentioned, about using short-term dollars, whether they're federal or not, for slots, and thinking about how you're going to sustain that. But you'll see in a couple of minutes the ways states have used short-term dollars to get some of the data about how this works, or work out the kinks about the program, or test out a pilot innovation, and then use that to advocate in their state legislature or with other funds to sustain it. So it is possible. You do want to be intentional and thoughtful about it. So once you know what you want to sustain, and it's very important, as I mentioned, I believe, to have a plan and to be very clear and have your partners to be clear on it, then you can take a look at a strategic approach to financing. And strategic approach to financing means you look at different kinds of strategies that have different goals. Coordinating funds increase the efficiency of funds. They sometimes leverage and maximize other funds, and they sometimes repurpose funds that are used for other priorities that are not as important or as compelling, and for these new purposes. Often, coordinating funds does not require new money, but may require reassigning funds to different goals, or using time-limited funds in a very intentional way to provide the glue to expand a program or to pilot it. I'm going to go ahead and share with you the definitions that we used. This information is in a brief, and that's on the PDG website. I will put the link in the chat, where both the recent webinar where we had some states presenting on their specific strategies, and the brief is, so you can follow up later. But blending, braiding, and layering are funds that we use, and I've used the umbrella term of coordinated funds. The main difference really between them, in part, is the level of accountability and how separate you keep the funding streams as you put them together. So blending is 2 or more funding streams that are used to fund a set of services, but the funds are not necessarily tracked by funding sources. Often federal funds do not allow you to blend. They may allow you, and this would require you working with your legal counsel and ensuring that you're following the rules, they may allow you to braid funds. Again, similar purpose, to support a full kind of comprehensive service, but each fund is allocated and tracked in the accounting system separately. And then layering became a term that was used actually in the early Head Start grants, and there is specific language in their guidelines. but it's like thinking about a layer cake. The first layer is funding for basic services. I'm going to say, a home visiting program or something. The second might be to provide additional, in-person classroom space to those kids and families that are getting home visiting. And the third might be to provide therapeutic services to certain children that just need it. So you could see that layering funds from an administrative perspective does require some intentionality and internal controls and audit but from a child and family perspective and thinking about children first, it requires them it allows children and thus families to get the full package of services that they need to meet the needs of the whole child, which is really what our goal is. So we're trying to work on the back end to make sure our processes and policies and pieces are in place so that a family and a child, we are thinking about holistically and meeting their needs. Sorry, this is always fun. I don't know why that happens. Okay. As I mentioned quickly, it's also important to recognize that coordinating funds is for a specific purpose, usually about increasing efficiency, which is very important, especially at the program level. If you can reduce the number of administrative staff that are needed to just manage the funds and put more dollars into quality or slots, that's an amazing result. Sometimes they allow you to use dollars more flexibly. And when different funds that we're putting together and always seeking new funding, they have different funding cycles. Sometimes coordinating funds can fill a gap in time or in a length of service. So it's very, very important to think about this more or less as a puzzle piece, how you can strengthen connections so no child falls through the cracks and we have a continuity of services. What I'm going to talk to you about now are a set of 7 strategies that I identified that you all were implementing based on a review and analyses of your annual performance reports and my knowledge and research of financing and what's happening across the country. I'm going to be honest with you, I was really, really impressed with the number of strategies and ways that states are using to ensure they have maximized and leveraged the funds that they have in order to meet the needs of children and families, and some in really innovative ways. The PDGB-5 grant, as Katie said, it's been a really powerful tool for systems building, and I'm very much humbled by the work you all do every single day. So I am, because of time, going to go through this rather quickly. But as I mentioned, there is more information in the document and in the webinar recording. So the first one is building local capacity to more efficiently use resources. This is a rather common strategy and becoming more common of many states like Oregon, Louisiana, West Virginia, Illinois, New Hampshire, building these kind of community hub models or regional hub models. Now, not all of them give fiscal decision-making to the community level, but many do. And I will say that one of my best examples I often use is in West Virginia, where the county collaboratives actually have to develop a collaborative budget that intentionally shows how they are leveraging Head Start, IDEA, state dollars in order to provide mixed delivery preschool programs. And further, they have to have a county collaborative team that's looking at how they connect with other resources for children and families in the community. I know that Louisiana, Virginia is going to speak a little bit later. They are doing these things so that decision making about fiscal resources is both close to those that understand the need, but also they are close to those that could possibly leverage some businesses or other community folks that may want to invest in their own community. a very good strategy. By the way, as I talk about these 7 strategies, I'm talking about them individually, but as you're thinking about your work, strategic financing, sustainability planning, thinking about using many or all of them, if you will, to build a really strong system of financing to support what your goals. Now, many of you know that a lot of times we devolve the decision and the responsibility to blend funds to the local level. That puts a significant burden on local programs and or local communities. The degree to which you can blend funds at the state level, so that you know, in part because of the way funds flow, that isn't always the case. For example, you can't really do that with Head Start funds, but you could potentially do that with state preschool dollars or CCDF dollars or IDA dollars. And Minnesota and Rhode Island have done that. Also health dollars, they've done that. And there's some examples in the brief about that. But to the degree, the first stop for state leaders is to look at ourselves, like look at the state. What can we do to make funding more efficient so that it's easier and we can get it out to the programs and communities in a more efficient way and in a way that reduces some of the administrative burden. Often one of the first steps is actually looking at the funding streams and or the programs and making sure that goals are aligned, that you understand where regulations possibly overlap, possibly duplicate, and standards, again, align or duplicate. So many of you, a number of you are looking at coordinated eligibility and enrollment systems, potentially building out data systems to support that, both families having access, so they go in and they, you know, complete some forms and then they see all the programs they're eligible for, and also for community folks or providers or state or local leaders to see, here's the set of families I have in my community or in my state, and here's all the services they're eligible for. How can I ensure we're doing this efficiently and making sure everybody gets access to everything? So, for example, Washington State developed a statewide early learning coordination plan, had a very large, goal, but one of its first steps was just to understand what are all the early learning programs, funding streams, regulations that we potentially need to, identify barriers to system integration, barriers to funding. Colorado developed some matrices that, again, were really designed to kind of get under the hood and see what were some of the barriers to coordinating funds. Planning for sustainability of time-limited funds. I always say that the minute you get time-limited funds, you should start planning for how you're going to sustain whatever service or whatever initiative you're funding. Most of the time that doesn't happen because we're, busy getting the program up and running. But very, very important to have a kind of a plan, do, review approach to sustainability planning, have this part and parcel as the work you do. As I mentioned earlier, there are lots of different strategies you can use to do that, but a very important thing to think about, and a number of the folks of your PDG B5 grantees have been engaging in that kind of planning. Option 5 is to be intentional about using time-limited funds to pilot an innovation, excuse me, and collect data on what you would need to scale it statewide. And we had a couple of very successful examples from Alabama, and they were able to pilot their first-class pre-K and 4 infant toddler childcare programs, developed the first-class B5 foundation program. They collected data on the efficacy of the strategy, expanded to 15 classrooms, and then were able to secure additional funds. Washington State had a similar approach. And I apologize for going a little fast, but there's a lot of information that we want to share with you today. So policy option 6 is consolidating or aligning governance and authority. I know, we have our PDGB5 states. Colorado's in the midst of that. Alabama has done that. Connecticut, I heard, present yesterday, and Alabama presented yesterday. So a number of states are either consolidating within certain agencies, or they're aligning governance and authority even across agencies, or they're creating a new department. And the intention is that creates greater efficiency and opportunity to blend and braid and coordinate funds. And we're hoping that, as these less than a handful of states are implementing this, we get some data on the efficacy and the result of that. Finally, a number of you, I want to, just remind you about the importance of looking at policy and funding, and as you're building your data systems, to include cost and revenue information in your comprehensive data systems. A number of you are doing cost modeling or fiscal mapping, and it is a necessary first step in understanding where there is the opportunity and the need to coordinate funds. So there are lots of different strategies. Your colleagues have been successful. You'll see examples in the brief or listen to them on the webinar. Feel free to reach out to any of us. Some of the key takeaways are here. Intentionally embedding new programs in existing program infrastructure, identifying where blending and braiding are already occurring in your communities and collecting data on how that's working. As I mentioned, examining, doing kind of a policy analysis so that you see what the opportunities might be and or the barriers, and you might be able to go for a waiver or change in regulation. Piloting new ways of coordinating funds so that you get kind of better at it at both a state level and a local level, and developing a consolidated project plan and budget that accounts for all funds. That helps you see all the resources you have to meet your goals. So we do have a number of resources available both here and on our website, on the PDGB5 website under the Sustaining Finances tab. So we encourage you to take a look at those and reach out to us if you would like to have more information. And I want to thank you very, very much for giving me this opportunity to share. And I'm going to switch for a minute so that I can introduce our next speaker. I'm going to stop sharing my screen for a second. I'm really, really pleased to introduce Jamila Smith. As Tammy said, she's the director of the Office of Innovation and Early Learning Programs at the U.S. Department of Education. Had the pleasure of working with Jamila for a little while when we had the Center on Enhancing Early Learning Outcomes. She oversees many initiatives that provide financial and technical support to improve the educational achievement of students, particularly high-need students and young learners. Jamila began her career in education over 15 years ago in the risk management service, supporting states and the insular areas in assessing program performance risk and developing monitoring and fiscal controls for Title I and Title III programs. So she's very familiar with the interaction of policy and fiscal issues, financial issues. She's led initiatives to support students and communities in rural and geographically isolated areas, and provided technical assistance around performance management and education reform sustainability. Prior to joining the U.S. Department of Education, Jamila's commitment to education reform was solidified early in her career in her work as a social work advocate for homeless children, where she advocated for coordinated and timely assessment services for elementary age children. So I'm really pleased to introduce Jamila, and I am going to get her slides up, and she will share with you additional ways.
Great, thank you.
Coordinate.
Laura, I'm going to go ahead and just jump in while you pull those up. Good day, everyone. I'm excited to join today's session. While Lori is pulling up the slides, just wanted to make a note that these slides were designed with the intention that they be shared with your teams for deeper discussion and unpacking. So noting that if I wanted to encourage deeper exploration and adoption, that obviously these examples, we needed to provide you with the tools to make that happen. So if you find the slides to be a bit text heavy, just letting you know that that's by design and not by default. So wanting to ensure that you all are able to have broader conversation. And I can just go ahead and jump in, just keep going, Lori, as you're looking
Jamila,
to make that.
I just want to make sure. Okay, I'm sorry, everybody. Just make sure. Okay, let me just make sure that. Can you see the slides?
I can. I think they're in viewer mode. If you put it in presenter mode.
Yeah, I'm going to try that. But
Or whatever mode you had your slides in previously.
I know. Sorry. Go ahead and I'll try to figure this out.
Sure, no worries. So just wanted to note that the department manages a number of grant programs that allow for supports for early learners and early learning educators. We coordinate closely with the Department of Health and Human Services to support the alignment between HHS's early care and Head Start programs and the department's early learning programs. You can probably go ahead and advance to slide 2, Lori. Yeah, that one. Multiple studies have proven that early learning paves the way for learners in later grades and throughout life. So what children learn in their first few years of life and how they learn it can have long-lasting effects on their success and health throughout life. In these first few years, a child builds a number of skills and experiences, which many of us in many of the programs that you oversee can further support. So as we advance to the next slide, just want to talk to you a bit about Title I Part A, which allows districts to provide preschool programs to improve educational outcomes for eligible children from birth through the age in which the district is able to provide a free and public education. Title I preschool programs are intended to assist children most at risk of failing to meet the state's academic standards. Certain children are also automatically eligible to participate in Title I preschool programs, such as children who were a part of Head Start, or who attended Title I preschools anytime in like the past 2 years, children who receive services through Title I Part C or the Migrant Education Program in the past 2 years, preschool age children who are experiencing homelessness, and children who are in local institutions or attending a community day program for neglected or delinquent children. These are only a few examples, but I also cited the non-regulatory guidance right there in the slide that holds additional information on allowable uses of funds and how both the state and the district levels can be able to take advantage of some of these opportunities. So progressing to the next slide here. There we go. So the Elementary and Secondary Education Act, or ESSA, as we affectionately call it, includes several programs that serve special populations of students. As I mentioned earlier, children who are experiencing homelessness, those from migrant families, dual language learners or English learners, children who have immigrated to the US, and supports to American Indians or indigenous populations, Alaskan Natives, and Native Hawaiians. These students are often in need of supports that a high quality early learning program can provide to help address opportunity gaps between them and their peers, starting early, but also potential gaps that may exist later in life as well. There are specific funding streams available to support early learners within these populations. And here I provide several examples of such supports and a few on the next few slides as well. Specifically for the McKinney-Vento program, children whose families are experiencing homelessness are often highly mobile. And as a result, they may have a lower rate of preschool enrollment when compared to other populations. Yet high quality early learning experiences can be extremely beneficial for this population. And in order to promote greater stability, the McKinney-Vento Act requires that districts presume that keeping the child in their school of origin is in their best interest, except of course, when it's at the request of like the parent or the caregiver. In terms of supporting our children whose families feed America or our migratory workers, the Migrant Education Program, or Title I Part C, provides funds for states for preschool instruction, as well as other activities such as family literacy, supplemental instruction in reading and math, and various other services. As for our dual language learners, we know that there are a number of longitudinal studies that have proven that English learners who participate in early learning programs achieved English proficiency much sooner than their peers who did not participate in similar programs. These programs can present an opportunity for the children to strengthen and nurture not only their home language while on a path to English language acquisition. As we get ready to progress to the next slide, I know that that many of our Indigenous students and our Alaskan Natives and Native Hawaiians have been affected by scarce resources kind of in and around where they may live. Therefore, they may greatly benefit from high quality early learning programs. So just ensuring that as we're thinking about increasing slots, we're also thinking about equity and how we are tapping into some of the communities who may have higher need in and around kind of where our programs may be situated. ESSA explicitly includes early learning as an allowable activity in several Title VI or Indian education programs. However, the types of activities that are supported through Title VI, they may vary a little bit. So for example, Title VI Part A, which is the Indian Education Act for LEAs, allows education funds to be used for early childhood programs that emphasize school readiness, while also ensuring that there are a number of kind of other areas that are covered as well. Title VI Part C, the Alaska Native Education Program, that supports early childhood education and other education activities, as well as programs for infants. Title VI Part B, which is our Alaskan or Native Hawaiian, education program, allows funds to support services for children starting at birth through 3 years old, preschool programs, as well as program research. And so as or Lori transitions to the next slide, we'll be able to shift our focus from allowable activities that can support your state's or your district's dynamic early educators. We know that in terms of our early educators, the knowledge and skill that is required of an effective educator, whether it be an early educator or an educator sort of in latter grades, it's increased and over time as science has revealed more about the capabilities of young children, how they learn best, and the importance of early education for later school success. Therefore, higher qualifications for teachers and other staff, ongoing practice-based professional development and learning, mentoring, coaching, and other professional development consultations for teachers, administrators, and other staff are just a few of the nationally recognized elements of a high-quality early learning program. These slides here speak to the importance of our educators by providing a few examples of how Title II Part A funds can be used to support both the state and the local levels efforts in improving teaching quality and increasing the capacity of school leaders as well as our administrators. We can't leave our administrators out to support early learning programs. So next slide. Just in keeping with the focus on early learning professional development, this slide highlights titles 1, Part A, 2 Part A, and 3 Part A, and how we can work in coordination to build teacher capacity to support English learners in ways that are consistent with each of the program's non-supplanting requirements. And again, I want to point your attention to the non-regulatory guidance. It's really important for me, well, I believe for all of us who work in the federal government, to ensure that you all are able to find exactly where the guidance lies, so that you can take it back to your teams and be able to point out explicitly where these things are allowable. But there are a number of citations, examples, and scenarios for your consideration in thinking about how you might leverage other federal funding to get the most for your early learners. On the next slide, yes, I guess the next slide. I borrowed this slide from our colleagues in the Office of Special Education Programs, just to highlight a bit about, when we're talking about educating young children, we're talking about all young children, not just those who are neurotypical or who are not our disabled students, but finding ways of supporting all of our children. And I encourage you kind of within your early learning teams to contemplate how you might tap into these funding streams, Part B and Part C, in support of students with disabilities. And as Lori put it, just ensuring that no child falls between the cracks. So next slide, please. Within the Office of Elementary and Secondary Education, you all may be familiar with the ESSER program, but just in case you're not, within the department, we have a State and Grantee Relations Office that administers this program. And our colleagues have shared that these state plans, they do consider them to be kind of living documents, and they anticipate that there will be revisions over the next few years, especially as meaningful consultation and implementation continues to take place. So if we also released FAQs for both the ESSER and the GEARS programs, A few of the examples within the FAQs actually spoke directly to the emergency relief funds that support services to children as young as age 3 within IDEA Part B, Section 611. So just wanted to make sure you all had that information in case you are contemplating or unfamiliar with what is currently in your state and district's plan for using those funds. So progressing to the next slide. There are, just waiting for it to rest, just make sure it's not on my end. Lori, are you able to advance the slide? Okay, there are additional examples of allowable uses of funds to support early learners that qualify for preschool supports from ages 3 to 5 years old under IDEA Part B, Section 619. As you can see, there are more opportunities to provide training and professional development just to ensure coordination as students exit the Part C program and enter kindergarten. There are also additional supports that are offered to students in migratory families to help ease the impacts of the pandemic on special populations. Again, as I noted earlier, I would strongly encourage you to review your state's submitted plan just to ensure that it supports early learners and early educators. And if for some reason that work is not there, just working within your state and district teams to find ways of having that included, before the funds expire. So on this next slide, I know that this is a program that you are all quite familiar with, but I wanted to take the final opportunity to just encourage alignment and collaboration between early childhood education programs and our K through 12 education system. Greater coordination at both the state and the local level within and between programs that serve young children, and encourage a more seamless learning experience from preschool through the earlier grades, which is why we so highly value our partnership that we have with HHS. In order to accomplish these goals, it's going to take states and districts, schools, and early care centers to encourage and consider the vertical alignment of programs, which would address the progressive development of standards from birth through 3rd grade that provide a continuum for children's knowledge and skills. And so as I begin to conclude the presentation on the next slide, just wanted to leave you with a few next steps in terms of expanding, connecting, and acting. So asking you to expand by sharing these slides. Again, I mentioned they were text heavy with that kind of design in mind of it being shared just beyond this one presentation. And having additional conversations and trainings within your agencies and teams, and working with your district partners and your state partners to explore how formula grants can be used to support your state's vision for early learning. Connecting with your early learning leadership team, and realizing the opportunity for better coordination of services and supports for young children. Acting by beginning to build or building, maybe perhaps you already have a state's kind of a vertical alignment plan, but building on those efforts, reviewing your state ESSER plans and opportunities for early learning supports. And as I prepare to conclude the presentation, just want to leave you on the next slide with a few resources. Again, I think it's very important that you all have the necessary information to continue this work and to continue to kind of dig in and show your colleagues where the examples and the guidance exist. This captures in greater detail some of the information I shared earlier in the presentation. And I believe the last slide is my final slide. Just wanting to leave you all with, if we can go to there we go, it comes up. I think it's just a delay on my end. Just wanted to leave you all with my contact information, as well as the department's early learning newsletter and the mailing list. That's a newsletter that's co-managed between the Office of Elementary and Secondary Education and our partners in the Office of Special Education Programs, as well as HHS's monthly newsletter. So thank you for your time. I hope you enjoyed the convening up to date, and you will continue to enjoy the rest of the convening for the day. Thank you all for your time. I believe I'm going to hand it over to Judy now.
Thank you, Jamila. Thank you for sharing all the resources, and hopefully this has provided food for thought for the states as they go into their state time this afternoon, and including a list of resources not only that support the workforce, but opportunities for partnering at the state level with our state education agencies, as well as our lead agencies for CCDBG and other partners that we that we work towards building our system for early childhood development. So thank you again, Jamila. What I am going to do right now is I am going to go ahead and provide a quick overview of the next 4 presenters from Rhode Island, Louisiana, Michigan, and Wisconsin. And building upon what we heard today from Katie and encouraging states to look at increasing access to high quality programs through the provision of slots. We have identified 2 states, Rhode Island, Louisiana, who will share with us their experiences so far in their work in providing slots, increasing the availability of slots over the last 3 years. So Rhode Island, Lisa Nugent, who is the coordinator for early learning at Rhode Island's Department of Education and oversees the state pre-K program, will be talking to us about how they've been coordinating multiple funding sources, like Lori has expressed expressed for and promoted, to expand access to high quality through Rhode Island's pre-K mixed delivery program. Then we will have Karen Powell and Devin Camerata. Karen is the Deputy Assistant Superintendent for Early Childhood, and Devin is the Director of Access Strategies and Business Support. And they will share with us their experience over the last 3 years with their Ready Start networks and allocated seat models. After Louisiana, we will have Joe Milano, who's the PDG manager for Michigan, and Annie Watson, who's a principal consultant who has been working with the PDG program. And they will share with us sustainability efforts, sustaining early childhood systems change, and Michigan's regional approach to sustainability. And then we will finish with Wisconsin and their overview of their project growth, rising to the childcare challenges with public and private partnerships. This comprehensive effort to not only increase the number of slots that are available, but also in support of compensating the workforce. We will have Tina Pfister, Program and Policy Analyst with the Wisconsin Department of Children and Families, Division of Early Care and Education, and Andrea Camilleri, Strategic Initiatives Advisor at the Wisconsin Department of Children and Families and Division of Early Care and Education, who will share their experiences with us today about this highly innovative approach. After all 4 states have presented, we will take a 10-minute break before our next session. So I am going to hand it over to Lisa, please.
Thank you. I sounded so important. I love it. Good afternoon and or good morning, people, depending on where you are today. I'm just waiting for this to jump up into presentation mode. But we are going to go through today kind of some of the steps that Rhode Island took with their, there we go, PDG funding. Just very quickly, overview, kind of how we leverage multiple funding sources to expand our RI Pre-K program, talk a little bit about our strategic plan, how we use shared governance. We have multiple state agencies that are helping us grow the pre-K, and then really what PDG's role was. I'll talk a little bit about the current state of RI Pre-K and really what those new models look like. And then some of our successes and challenges, because of course you pilot something, it is not perfect to begin with. And then obviously end with my contact information for anyone who has any questions. So we have a strategic plan in Rhode Island, and expansion of RI Pre-K is actually just one of our 5 objectives that is in that plan. And so because of the many different interlocking parts, we have a shared ECCE governance committee that was created to make sure that we had an interagency way of making decisions. And when we came with these 4 funding models, it was really through community feedback that they were created. And then we wanted to make sure that we had our partners. I sit at the Rhode Island Department of Education. We really wanted to make sure that our partners at DHS were on board. We wanted to make sure we had Head Start on board, so our Head Start Collab office. So we kind of put everybody together. So PDG grants have long supported the expansion of our RI Pre-K work. But in this round in particular, it really did provide some dedicated funding for actual growth, actual seats. It also gave us funding for some additional staff to help ensure the high quality delivery that we wanted. And then the professional and technical assistance that goes directly to the teaching teams within the programs. Obviously very important for all of us to support our teachers, especially right now. And the investment has also let us leverage other funding sources. So yes, we use CCDBG. We were lucky enough to have our governor grant us some GEAR funding. And so we should, use those with stimulus fundings to really support additional expansion. And we're going the wrong way. Okay, so here's where we are right now. We are supporting 658 RI pre-K seats in the 2021-2022 school year through PDG funding. And then we also sustain that for this 22-23 school year. So it allowed us to bump up to 2,364 seats. We have a goal of 7,000 seats, which would be universal. Right now, we are only servicing 4-year-olds. There has been conversation about 3s, and hopefully we will get there at some point. So what are the hallmarks of RI pre-K? So we serve, right, as I said, children who are 4 years of age. Those classrooms need to achieve our comprehensive early childhood education approval, which is really a pretty rigorous set of regulations to ensure that they are delivering a high quality environment. It is led by a bachelor degree teacher. It is a full 6-hour day, 180 days a year. All of the classrooms use a high quality RIDE endorsed curriculum. There are multiple curriculum that they can choose from, but we've endorsed 5 of them that we ask our RI pre-Ks to implement within their classroom. They need to participate in all PDTA activities and participate in all of the RIDE monitoring activities that we do to kind of provide some oversight and to make sure that we are delivering on the promise to the parents that their children will be ready for kindergarten. So as we were expanding, we wanted to make sure that the seats that we were expanding with still met those high quality benchmarks. We also wanted to make sure the seats were also completely free for families while investing in our mixed delivery system. And we paid very close attention to how does this strengthen birth to 5 system overall? How does RI pre-K entering a building help somebody with their overall quality of their program, both academic quality, teacher quality, and then even the fiscal health of the program? So our original design prior to the funding models that we implemented with braided and blended funding was a 1 classroom-based award to a community-based Head Start or an LEA. We assigned the seats by lottery, and it was just 1 grant. So you could apply. I have an empty classroom. That's a key. I have an empty classroom because I can't displace children. I will apply to do this. We grant you the money, and then we lottery the children into the seat for you, and we monitor the classrooms. So here are a few of the problems. The model was funded entirely by general revenue from the state, and the programs had to have an empty classroom to start because we did not allow them to displace children. So if you were a program that might have had low enrollment and maybe you only had 10 children out of the 18 that could be in that classroom, you are not allowed to apply for RI pre-K. And so it was really a barrier for our providers because of the space constraints. Historically, you had to have that empty classroom. It was also difficult to retain your families due to the lottery system. So if your family attended your program from birth all the way through their 3-year-old year, even if you had an RI pre-K, they had to go in the lottery and they might get placed somewhere else. And while we really tried on the back end to make sure that children were able to stay where they were, as we're getting bigger, it really wasn't as implementable as we wanted it to be. And we heard back from our community, and they were like, look, we really want to do this and we want to invest in our quality initiatives. We want to be a part of RI pre-K, but I don't want to kick my families out, which we totally understand. A center, a Head Start, they're a family. Head Starts also came to us and said, you know, we'd love to be able to offer a 6-hour day. We'd love to extend our school year, but we don't have enough funding to do that. Is there a way that we could start to partner? We also wanted to braid classrooms so that as RI pre-K was going in, it wasn't RI pre-K on one side of the building and Head Start on the other side of the building. We really wanted to bring those classrooms together. So that's what we did. We now have 5 funding models, and you are only eligible for one of the expansions that is not the existing model. Anyone can apply for an existing model that's traditionally funded. You have a classroom and we will do that. But then we really looked at how do we leverage federal Head Start funds, how our CCAP funding, and really layer the funding so that RI pre-K is quality dollars coming on top to help retain teachers, to help purchase materials, to help lengthen the day or the dosage that children were receiving. And so now not every classroom has availability to all of the funding sources, but we help them now when they want to come in to be an RI pre-K. The hardest place to do this, and I sit at the Department of Education, was within our LEAs, because we have funding formula that is a little bit different. Typically, Head Starts and community-based organizations know exactly where their money is and where it's going and how it's being spent. It's a little bit different on the LEA side. And so what we did for LEAs was we came up with quality grants that went directly to the early childhood programs of the district so that they could spend that money on the materials and the supplies and the professional development and curriculum that their staff needed. And that has been so far successful to date. So when we put these models out, we got a tremendous response to our grant application. This was the highest amount of grant applications we had received. 49 applications came in asking for over 1,000 seats. And so we were really excited. We ended up funding 27 additional new classrooms and 2 new communities. So it brought us up to 18. But people really responded to the fact that we listened to their feedback and we were willing to work within the confines that we could to braid and blend this funding so that every child could have this opportunity. And so again, what I will say is that shared governance team that was put together at the beginning of our strategic plan has really built a strong relationship between all of the different state agency staff. And so we are able to execute this very quickly. I work very quickly with my partner over at DHS, and we are able to go back and forth and make sure that everybody is getting the funding that they need. We also considered ways to identify families who weren't enrolled in CCAP because they didn't know about it. They didn't know it was a benefit that was available to them. And so we were able to help them move through that and maximize our use of federal funding so that we could give more money to programs. We have created clear policies around matriculation of children who don't qualify for CCAP. But now what we allow someone to do is say, hey, I have 10 children who are pre-K age that want to stay with me, who have been with me since infancy, but I need 8 more. And so we matriculate those students into the classroom. They stay with their friends and with their staff. And then as a state agency, we pay for and lottery in the other children to make a full classroom. Now they're able to pay their teacher and their teaching assistant. We add quality dollars on top of that. And we support the entire classroom, not just the children who come in through the lottery. Same goes for the partnership that we have with Head Start. We share comprehensive services so that every child is getting what they need. We dedicate resources to technical assistance for providers. We really want to make sure our teachers are supported. There is coaching, there is TA, and other types of PD that they can attend. Why this won't go? There we go. And look at me go. So any questions, there is my email. Feel free to email us out. I know this was a really quick overview and it's some really exciting stuff. We'll gladly jump on a call with people and let you know kind of how we did it and how we promoted it within our mixed delivery system. But I want to turn it over now to Louisiana to take it away.
All righty. Can y'all hear me? Let's see here. Just making this bigger. All righty. Thank you so much, everybody. I'm so excited to present to you all today from Louisiana about our Birth to 3 Seats pilot, which we started through the preschool development grant that we were awarded 3 years ago. And I'm excited to talk about the wonderful things that have happened because of it. But first, the reason why we specifically targeted our birth to 3-year-old children is because we know across the country, but in Louisiana specifically, our greatest need of increased access to high quality care is with our birth to 3-year-olds. This graphic is something that we've updated yearly, and it just shows the drastic gap in services for our infants, 1 and 2-year-olds. And I think our colleague in the previous presentation mentioned a lack of awareness of the opportunities that children have. And I think so many families forget or don't know that high quality care can start truly from birth. And this pilot is something that, we have tried very hard to make sure that every family in Louisiana is aware that their children are able to access. And so we've been researching these numbers since about 2018 when our assessment began, when we first received our initial PDG grant. And these numbers have increased, but still pretty minutely as far as we would like to see. So before we get into the actual pilot, this pilot is housed within another pilot that we started that is very exciting, now codified in our policies that will make sure that this exists forever and ever. But we have a now program called Ready Start Networks, which are our different community network lead agencies throughout the state. They represent typically an individual parish, but sometimes they represent more regional spaces. A few represent multiple parishes. And these Ready Start Networks, as we call them, pursue innovative solutions to their community's greatest challenges in expanding access to early childcare. And they do so through a couple of different avenues. One is developing a blueprint that they share with the department about a guide to their network, their vision, what their goals and what aims they're trying to accomplish in a yearly period. Creating a coalition of community leaders who are, local advocates for children, who are providers, who are families, who are anybody who can contribute to the conversation around expanding access. Then they establish local governance structures, to guide the decision-making process at the local level. And lastly, they've been charged with developing funding to support the implementation not only of their Ready Start Network efforts listed above, but also in expanding access for childcare. And I will say, this is something that I could talk a much longer period of time about, but that is really an area where many of our Ready Start Networks have had difficulty. A few of them have found funding sources to drive expansion of access, but that's a much more challenging piece of this work that we're really exploring in the coming years, and will be instrumental in continuing the work that I'm about to talk to you about. So Ready Start Networks, again, are all across the state. These different regions have been slowly implemented throughout the last few years with our PDG grant. You can see our first cohort is that pink color. They've expanded throughout the last couple of years. And we have now had 37 folks or 37 regions become a part of our Ready Start Network cohorts. So in all of these different areas, there's just a handful who don't have type 3 centers that qualify for the work that I'm about to describe. But all across our state, this is where this Birth to 3 Seats pilot is happening. So we call it, the title of it is called the Birth to 3 Seats pilot, but if you want to expand it, we've called it an allocated seats model, which means that we are allowing at the department community leaders to administer the seats, creating stability for the providers with a guaranteed source of funds, and help families apply for this pilot in person. So this kind of is runs parallel with what many of you, I'm sure, experience with your child care assistance programs in your state. Typically, that eligibility process is housed in your, in your department building. It's done over the phone, it's done through mail, it's done through an electronic service. And what we have found in Louisiana is that has really created barriers for many families who don't have the technology literacy that is needed to complete the paperwork, or they need somebody in person to help gather documents or help just understand the process generally. So this allocated seats model really does two things. It provides stability for those providers by a guaranteed amount of seats from the Ready Start network, and it allows that in-person level of administration with families in the community to get everything they need in order to qualify and immediately be enrolled without the added levels of the state bureaucracy that sometimes happens. So the flow of this funding, the flow of this goes from starting at the department. The department selects the Ready Start networks and how much money they will be allocated to roll out these seats. And then they choose the providers based on some qualifications that I'll go over in a moment. They create MOUs or partnership agreements about the additional requirements beyond what the department sets up. And then the families are enrolled into care. So for site eligibility, we have at the department set in place that there are some quality measures that must be true in order for a provider to participate in this pilot. So they must be a type 3 center, which means they're not located in a school setting, or they must be a family child care site set up in academic approval, which is essentially our highest level, our highest threshold of quality for family child care sites. They must have a proficient or a performance rating of proficient or above. We have made some qualifications that if there's a brand new center that would greatly benefit from this guaranteed funding source, the department has allowed for brand new centers to participate with the asterisk that the Ready Start network will do additional work with them, like additional coaching hours, additional informal observations, additional professional development, et cetera, to ensure that those brand new centers who haven't yet gotten a quality rating are all but guaranteed to be on the path to a proficient or above rating in their first round of evaluations. And then lastly, that site must have infant spots available or be able to provide infant spots with this funding. And we believe that was a huge component of the genesis of this pilot, because so many folks don't serve infants because it is so expensive. It is such a burden on providers when the costs are so high. So in order to incentivize making sure that infant seats were available, we made that a qualifier for participating in this pilot. And then lastly, that they must serve the seats full time, so 30 hours per week minimum, 6 hours of continuous care, and then meeting the ECAC requirements for teachers. So making sure that those teachers have everything that they need in order to be in front of children high quality. We also qualified that Ready Start networks were able to increase the rigor beyond what I just listed. If they had a really high number of providers who wanted to participate and not enough money to go around, or if they wanted to make sure that the process was a little bit more competitive. Now, the eligibility for families is another major component, and one of the rollouts of this pilot, because of course, we would want every child with a heartbeat to be able to enroll in this pilot and in care, but unfortunately, we don't have enough funding for every child. So what we did was align with our child care assistance program requirements with a few exceptions so that this program could be a little bit more flexible and account for some requirements that were more burdensome or were more restrictive with CCAP that we did have the flexibility as this was a pilot to do. So for example, the eligibility requirement for income was that families needed to be at or below 85% of the state median income. One difference from the CCAP program is that we allowed for families with minor unmarried parents to be at a slightly higher income threshold, 95%, because during the first 2 years of the pilot, we received a lot of feedback from our Ready Start networks that the families with minor unmarried parents, sure, they had a little bit higher income because they may have been, a two-parent household with a teenager who got into a situation where they needed to apply for this program. But the 85% state median income wasn't being inclusive enough to the additional burdens that families with a minor unmarried parent are taking on. So in order to respond to that need, we did make that slightly higher adjustment for families in that situation. And then additionally, those requirements were that parents must be working 20 hours per week at least, in training 20 hours per week, or in school full-time, a combination, or actively seeking employment, which means they had to register with our Louisiana Workforce Commission and be proving that they're actively seeking work. And I'll say, one of the main things that has been really great about this program, and I've said it already with the fact that they were, in-person support at the Ready Start Network level. But in order to gain all of the documentation to validate that a family meets these needs, there's a lot of steps that are involved with it. And having that in-person support and having the Ready Start networks intimately aware of what was needed has truly been one of the greatest accomplishments of this pilot. So just a quick overview of our 3 years of this pilot. We started with 13 Ready Start networks who were participating and have grown all the way to 32. And at our highest level of enrollment that first year, we had 667 children aged birth to 3. And we've increased that all the way to, as of October attendance of this year, 3,260 children, which I personally am so thrilled about. And I also want to note that that 3,260 was more than the estimated allocation that the department set forth, because Ready Start networks were able to, manipulate the funds, move dollars around, use some rollover funding year by year to ensure that they were serving maximum capacity children. And you can also note that in our first year, we only used preschool development grant funds to fund this work. But because of the enormous demand, especially spurred by the COVID-19 pandemic, we were able to braid stimulus funds in years 2 and 3 to meet this super high demand that you can see in that increase. And so in order to come to that total number, we did an estimation of rates. And this past year, we made those estimations based upon our market rate survey, what CCAP is paying per child, and the estimated bonus payments that children or that providers in CCAP receive based on their quality rating. So that behind the curtain math resulted in the numbers that you see in the table on your left. And so we allocated based on the amount of children that they estimated they would be able to serve, and multiplied that number by the one that you see in this table. And that's how we came to the calculations allocations that each Ready Start network received. And due to the significant increase in our infant rates, again, knowing that we're trying to get closer to the actual cost of care for infants, but that 18,000 is still probably quite short. We allocated, again, not based on an average, but based on a age group level amount, which was different from our first 2 years, and it made a significant difference in the amount of money that we allocated per network. Alrighty, next is just a couple of slides showing the data of our enrollment by age. You can see the growth in, or the number of by age children in our first year, our second year, and our present enrollment. So obviously we have a smaller number of infants being served than our 3-year-olds. That's been true all 3 years. But this has made a significant dent in the gaps that you saw in our first graph. So I'll just quickly address the successes and challenges that have been a part of this pilot, especially because I would encourage every single state to do something similar to this. And the successes that we've seen have been all around the family engagement and relationships with the Ready Start networks. It has really built a community that may not have previously existed because of that intimate relationship when helping families to apply for this program. We've also seen consistent growth in enrollment every year, and the demand for birth to 3 seats. People are asking for them more than a year in advance and asking about, how many seats can we have next year? Can we have twice as many? Can we have 3 times as many? I have new providers who want to join, et cetera. It's provided financial stability for Louisiana, not only through the COVID-19 pandemic that everyone in our nation faced, but we had 2 major hurricanes that devastated regions that were receiving birth to 3 seats fund, that were receiving birth to 3 seats funds. And it allowed those centers to literally stay open so that when they were able to return after the damage was resolved to actually serve kids, they would not have been able to open back up again if it hadn't been for birth to 3 seats. It allowed for increased compensation rates for the teachers in those centers that were serving birth to 3 seats. And those providers had consistent enrollment, consistent pay, and a consistent expectation for children. Now, I do know that somebody asked in the chat box about teacher retention. That's not a challenge that I listed here, but it is something that some of our providers or some of our Ready Start networks did say that they had some trouble, but because of our consistent pay, they were actually having a much easier time retaining teachers or keeping teachers in the classroom because of this guaranteed funding source. So some of our challenges, the biggest one, and it ties back to that funding gathering that the Ready Start networks need to do based on their charge, is that funding beyond the years of stimulus funds will not cover the cost of all of those 3,260 children that we currently have enrolled. We do not yet have funds secured or dedicated for B2 for 23-24. We are working really hard to make sure that that is true. We're talking with our state legislature to get dedicated funds. We're working with our CCDF funds. We are very hopeful and positive that we'll at least be able to maintain, if not expand. However, we always have to be prepared for when stimulus ends. And so that's what we're working on right now. The other challenges, are that it is more difficult for Ready Start networks with a smaller administrative staff because they're, not able to necessarily hire an additional person, or they have to wear many, many hats, and going through the details of an application process for a family is a little bit more challenging and time consuming than other components of their work. So folks who didn't have a larger staff did struggle to get everything done in a timely manner. Then the nuances of eligibility, like I mentioned, it is tricky, and the requirements have been difficult for Ready Start networks in their first year, but we've seen consistent growth in our monitoring that we do to ensure that they are all that they are all compliant with the work that or the requirements that we've set forth from them. If you're interested in doing something like this in your state, the steps that I recommend taking, that we at the Department of Education in Louisiana recommend, having a dedicated state staff member for the administration of the pilot For Louisiana, this was me, and I was the point of contact for all things birth to 3 seats for this entire time period that has happened. I still am this person, to be the expert in eligibility, to be the expert in the requirements, to be able to be at the ready to answer questions about whether a family qualifies, and to be able to make real-time decisions about what is best for the program moving forward, whether it's a decision that needs to be made in the moment or whether it's a change to be made for the upcoming year. Making sure that eligibility requirements are explicit and super abundantly clear before Ready Start networks or before your communities even begin enrolling. And then making sure that those are repeated early and often, because again, there's so many nuances to it. It can be really difficult to make sure that you are doing everything you need. And I'm getting the cue to wrap up. And so this is my last slide, but if you have any questions, you can reach out to myself or my supervisor, Karen Powell. And I really appreciate your time. PDG folks, I'm sorry I went a little bit over. I appreciate you. All righty.
All right. Hello, everybody.
Yeah, so Michigan is going to hop in real quick. We're going to talk about our approach. From the start, Michigan, when we wrote the renewal grant application, we did not intend to sustain a lot of the projects that we have in our application that would allow us at the state level to focus on a very small number of projects. But at the same time, with our regional and our community partners, some of the projects they were undertaking, we did ask them to think about how to sustain, and in some cases, partners wanted to pursue sustainability on their own as well. We discovered that in talking with our partners, however, that sustainability to them meant money, and that it was all about how are we going to get money to keep this going. But we know that sustainability has more aspects than just the monetary side. And so we are working with our partners at School Readiness Consulting, and Annie Watson's going to take over and talk about the kind of multi-tiered approach that we've decided to take. So I'll leave it in Annie's hands.
Great. Thank you so much, Joy. Annie Watson, she, her, the principal associate with School Readiness Consulting, like Joy mentioned. I'm excited to talk to you about sustainability today. So first, just a little bit of what we'll be talking about today. We'll do, Joy provided just a little bit of context and overview about the why behind the work. We'll talk about our approach to sustainability and share with you some initial successes and lessons learned from the work. So I'll just dig right into our approach to sustainability. Like Joy said, sustainability, I think, is top of mind for a lot of folks, PDG and otherwise, especially for programs who are doing really great work and want to sustain the work. Someone said earlier, right, like, oh, I hope folks are thinking about sustainability the moment they get funding. And that's exactly right, that those conversations need to start really, really early on. And so, really in its most simple form, sustainability is just a program's ability to continue its efforts with all of the needed resources and support. And so for many programs that really, for them, what is most top of mind, like Joy mentioned, is the financial health of the program or organization, which means, either increasing, like sustaining funding, increasing funding, or decreasing the dependence of a particular type of funding stream, right? And that's how a lot of folks think about sustainability. But what we know to be true is that, while funding is absolutely critical, there's no doubt about that, that for the viability of programs, sustainability in practice and in implementation is more of a dynamic process that really requires us looking beyond just the financial resources to include really careful and strategic planning and development focused on a few key levers for building sustainability and monitoring progress and outcomes. And so for us, those levers or those keys to sustainability look like effective program management, ongoing data collection and analysis, establishing key partnerships and securing resources, and building understanding and public will through effective storytelling. So for us, that means successful sustainability efforts, are best achieved with a clear set of tasks and strategies. And so our approach here, we've used sort of a three-step framework to help guide participants in our community of practice across Michigan to be able to grapple onto something as they think about sustainability. And so first, really thinking about creating a vision and clarifying our goals. Again, that early on thinking, we should be thinking about sustainability from the jump. Two, thinking about all of those levers or those key components of sustainability beyond just the funding. Funding is absolutely critical and important, and there are other components that support sustainability planning and the process. And then step three is creating an actual sustainability plan to then be able, with very specific concrete action steps, so that you can then monitor and implement, right, and refine your sustainability plan moving forward. So I'm going to share a little bit about what that has looked like for Michigan. There are a couple of components. First, we created a toolkit. And so, we designed this primarily for the folks that are participating in our PDGB5 Sustainability Community of Practice that SRC is facilitating. These are regional groups of PDGB5 grantees and leaders from across the state that come together in virtual convenings. And we grounded all of this in a toolkit. But really, we found that this is just a useful tool for a wide range of stakeholders in Michigan and really beyond for those who are just interested in sustainability. And so as teams of early childhood leaders begin to consider next steps to sustain their programs and other initiatives, this toolkit really aims to support the process by exploring each of those levers that I identified earlier and the key steps that are at the core of sustainability planning. So each section of this toolkit begins with a brief introduction to share the why does it matter, right? Why is it important for us to think of these particular levers and to define specific strategies that are important to consider as they relate to sustainability. Then each section also includes an opportunity to think deeply, to really consider in a nuanced way the concept and be able to apply it to their own work and their own experiences, as well as a section that's focused on action. So what are the specific things we can do related to that lever or that key component of sustainability? And then each section also has a list of resources that are targeted at frameworks, tools, and action-oriented resources for folks to be able to utilize as they continue to learn about each of the levers of sustainability. So in addition to the toolkit, as I mentioned, we have a community of practice. We have gotten really good in the last couple of years of bringing together folks virtually and building community. I guess that is one bright side of the global pandemic. And so we identified teams from each of the regions across Michigan who share a common interest in and need around sustainability. So we built these teams based on the 5 early childhood support network regions. And so each of the members of the team represent a diverse set of skills, knowledge, grant programs. And so, what we know to be true is that there is value in working in partnership with others regionally to build regional teams and the ability to connect with folks across the state. And so there's such value in each leader bringing their own experiences and their own set of knowledge from their own respective spaces and to be able to champion both their work and sustainability back in their communities. And so we have 3 community of practice sessions focused on the various levers of sustainability. We use a variety of facilitation strategies to engage in activities, discussion, information sharing, and then, of course, we ground in relationship building. And as part of our toolkit, what we have found to be really successful is, people often ask, like, well, which state is doing it well? Like, who's figured it out? And across like our biggest issues in early childhood, I think we still continue to ask those questions. And, not surprisingly, there's never really a clear answer. There's a lot of great work happening around the world, around the country, and across states. But I don't know that any one community has necessarily solved for all of early childhood's issues. And we still want to be able to spotlight folks who have incredible expertise and experience and knowledge. And so throughout the toolkit, we've identified field experts or guest lecturers who sit at the intersection of early childhood and the kind of topical content expertise around the components of sustainability to be able to provide an embedded webinar to really dig deep into part of those levers. So think storytelling, think equity and data and evaluation, those kinds of things. And in our community of practice, folks also had the ability to connect with those content experts in virtual office hours that they could sign up for with their teams to be able to ask really specific questions related to their sustainability journey and what's happening in their communities. Okay, and so this brings us to some initial successes and lessons learned here. So first and foremost, like talking about sustainability is absolutely timely. We know that PDGB5 was designed to infuse funds into states to strengthen early childhood service delivery and systems building. And as grant funds are expended, and a really important next step for states and communities is to develop those strategies for sustaining the work. So it is absolutely top of mind for folks about how they're going to continue to do the really excellent work that they're doing in their communities and across the state of Michigan. And so, grantees across the state are really seeking resources and supports, and also opportunities to connect with others who are facing the same challenges to be able to figure out what's working best. So, the Michigan Community of Practice for Sustainability is designed to build local capacity to plan and implement strategies to ensure that PDGB5 funded community programs and initiatives can be sustained. Next, we know that relationship building strengthens sustainability. Participants have really appreciated greater connection to each other and relationship building with other early childhood leaders focused on sustainability. So having some dedicated carved out time to meet with folks who are experiencing similar and different challenges related to sustainability and really be able to think and brainstorm together, hold a little space for what is frustrating and what is not working well and what is not feeling so hopeful, and to have some really generative conversations about what is working well has been a really important opportunity to really turn it back to our leaders to feel empowered and to be able to make really important connections with each other. And, I think they've even been surprised by how much they're learning about the full fabric of programs and services inside of the state. So there have been a couple of connections made of like, oh, I had no idea that was happening, or tell me more about this. So there are also connections just beyond sustainability to strengthen the kind of statewide network of early childhood leaders. And certainly last but not least, folks really desire tools and frameworks that can be applied directly, right? Sustainability planning is happening right now. And so whether this is a new concept for folks, they've been thinking about it a different way, or they are, actively working on a sustainability plan, the reality is that folks need information that they can apply directly in this moment. And so folks are wanting action-oriented tools, frameworks, things to be used directly to guide and inform their practice right now. And so to accommodate this need, that's why we created the Sustainability Toolkit as a way to both ground the work of the community of practice, but also help build the capacity statewide by creating tools and resources that could be tailored to each community context. So the way folks are able to utilize the toolkit, they could read it top to bottom. I mean, listen, I love a good 90-page, it may not be that long, but I love a good extensive and comprehensive document. And also folks are able to dig in and find exactly the kinds of resources that they might be looking for. So it can be used sort of in both ways. And so we imagine that our early childhood leaders are taking that toolkit back to their communities and back to their respective spheres of influence to be able to utilize those resources back in their communities as well. And so that's just like a quick overview of our community of practice in Michigan about sustainability. I have my contact information there, as well as Joy's, our partner in crime at Michigan Department of Education Office of Great Start.
No crime.
We absolutely love to partner with. So if you have any questions, please send them our way. Joy, any final words before we turn it over to Wisconsin?
Final words. I know there was a request for would we share? Yes, of course we would share. We're working through some staffing issues at the state level. I'm trying to get the toolkit posted on our website, but please, in the interim, feel free to contact me or Annie if you'd like us to email resources to you. We're happy to do that. And then it will be at michigan.gov/MDE in the early learners and care section. And we'll be able to supply that with TA as well. If you want to talk with your TA provider, I can share it with mine.
Great. Thank you so much, Joy. And we're going to hand it over to Andrea and Tina from Wisconsin.
All right. Hello, everyone, and thank you for sticking with us to the end of this session. Let me just share my screen. Here we go. Hopefully you can see everything. We're going to fly through a lot of content pretty quickly today. We're going to talk about project growth, where we assert that Wisconsin families are a good investment, and we want all businesses who are very interested in making strong return on their investments to think about the opportunities that they can be involved in helping us solve our lack of childcare slots and the sustainability of pay that our workforce is so deserving of. So moving ahead. Here's our quick agenda. We'll give you the project background, talk about the 4 different components of project growth, which consist of a toolkit, a business childcare advocates that are positioned all around our state, how we went about spreading the word about the projects and the grants, and then we'll talk about our 2 major grant programs that we've funded through this, using both COVID relief funds as well as PDG funds for our Dream Up grant. So I'm Andrea Camilleri, and my colleague Tina Feaster will be jumping in here in just a couple minutes. So first, whenever we talk about project growth, we kind of start at the beginning and try to set the stage because we're often communicating with audiences who are less familiar than all of you are, and then we are with the challenges that we face in the realm of childcare and early care and education. So we always want to come with data, and business leaders often respond very strongly to numbers, and we try to tell some stories as well. So we start with these numbers, which are probably fairly comparable to what you see in a lot of your different states. But prior to COVID-19, we had about 54% of our state population living in a childcare desert, defined as 3 or more children for each available slot. And in the last decade, we've had 9% of our group childcare and a whopping 68% of our family childcare programs close. So that has been a real challenge, especially in the rural areas. And on a national level, we always point out that American businesses lose an estimated $12.7 billion annually due to their employees' childcare challenges. And the national loss due to lost earnings, productivity, and revenue are estimated to be at about $57 billion a year. So we also emphasize that ours is a very hard-working state, where 75% of Wisconsin children under the age of 6 have all of their available parents in the workforce. Those numbers are quite high, particularly Wisconsin women participate in the workforce at high levels. And the access issues we always like to point out they disproportionately impact families with infants and toddlers, children with special needs, children of color, children receiving childcare subsidies, and families who are working non-standard hours. So the challenge is present, and very relatable for almost everyone across the state, but particularly for those families in those different categories. And then from an equity lens, we like to, of course, remind folks of the poverty levels in our state and how disparate they are by racial backgrounds, and that we all have a role to play in helping to address that challenge. So as we were developing the projects that are a part of Project Growth, we contracted with an advertising agency. So this snazzy PowerPoint template and all the imagery you'll see today are part of their work. We worked with a local firm to help us develop a brand and the communication materials for this project. And we did implement a paid media campaign almost a year ago now, where we had billboards all around the state, TV ads, radio ads, paid social media, digital video and display ads on the internet, and some online news sponsorships that ran some of our articles and sent out some of our stories to their email subscriber lists. So we've been really working to raise awareness. We've leveraged a lot of cross-agency partnerships and contacts inside and outside government. We've used all of our owned media channels like social media, email, newsletters. We've printed posters and given those out. We've held webinars, given conference presentations to many different stakeholder groups around the state. We did a press release, we had media events, and we worked with local politicians, city organizers, business executives, and community members, any of them who come to various stakeholder groups that we participate in. So with that, I'll turn it over to Tina to tell you more about the first 3 components of our program.
Thanks, Andrea. All right, so we have in our graphic here, the Business Childcare Toolkit, or the Business Toolkit, Business Advocate, Partner Up Grant, and Dream Up Grant. So like Andrea mentioned, the Partner Up Grant and Dream Up Grant are 2 primary grant programs through this, through Project Growth. We then developed a Business Toolkit, and we have Business Childcare Advocates that are located throughout the state. Go to the next one, Andrea. So the Business Childcare Toolkit was developed in partnership with the Wisconsin Early Childhood Association, Wisconsin Economic Development Corporation. We really focus, we have 6 modules that focus on building partnerships between businesses and childcare. So we talk about what childcare is, why high quality matters, how to build those relationships between businesses and childcare, what are the best practices for childcare, the rules and regulations about childcare in Wisconsin, sustaining childcare in communities, and why businesses should really partner with their local childcare. We also then have the Business Childcare Advocates. So these advocates are located at the childcare resource and referrals throughout Wisconsin. The roles are funded by the Preschool Development Grant, and they have several different duties that they work on. They are currently serving as a liaison and relationship builder between businesses and the childcare communities. They've been providing a lot of technical assistance, specifically around Partner Up right now. They're holding orientations and outreach events in communities. They're talking about what it means to sustain childcare in a community. They're working on, they're involved with local community work groups around childcare. They're recommending other opportunities, such as the opportunity for Dream Up and future rounds of Dream Up. And then they also connect the businesses and childcare providers with other resources and programs throughout the state. All right, so here are the grant parameters for Partner Up and Dream Up. So in Partner Up, we have 2 cohorts. The terms of the contract are 3, 6, 9, or 12-month contracts. We started our first cohort in June of this year and our second cohort in August of this year. And the purpose of Partner Up is really to focus on the existing childcare providers throughout the state. So it builds a partnership between local businesses, local childcare programs, through a contract for slots model. For Dream Up, we have 2 cohorts right now. We have a cohort that started in May and in November of this year. Dream Up is our innovation and growth. It's our strategic planning grant for communities. And then Andrea will talk a little bit more about Dream Up, but we do have another round coming next year. So Partner Up, like I mentioned, it's really focused on building that relationship between businesses and local childcare providers. We have talked about how it will help employees secure quality childcare, partner with a local regulated childcare program. So for us in Wisconsin, that could be a certified provider, which is a voluntary form of regulation, or it could be licensed providers. And it supports high quality childcare in the community. So when we released the grant for Partner Up, we had over 660 businesses apply for the grant. We were able to award 2 cohorts, like I mentioned, and we still have a wait list of businesses that have not been able to be funded yet. And so this map shows our awardees throughout the state. So we have the cohort 1 and cohort 2 map. So far, over 220 businesses have received an intent to award letter. Businesses really range from a wide variety of sectors. So it includes manufacturing and construction, healthcare, retail. It also includes childcare providers. So we opened this up and we allowed childcare providers to apply for the grant as the business, and their employees are then eligible to receive funding through this grant. And so funding is based on what Wisconsin has determined is the true cost of care. And then it depends on the number of slots that business needs, the age of the children, part-time or full-time status. And like I mentioned, these are some of our top industry participation for Partner Up. Childcare is currently half of the businesses that are participating in Partner Up. And then we have here we have healthcare, construction, manufacturing, other services, professional and business services, all the way down to real estate, finance, and wholesale trade. All right, so Partner Up, our numbers there on participating businesses is probably a little off, but about 199, 200 businesses that are participating. We have funded, this lists 906 slots, but we are closer to 1,000 childcare slots right now. 12% of the participants are people of color. The average age for employee that is participating is 35 years old. The average household income is $50,000. And 97% of families were able to continue with their current childcare program. And that was really one of our big goals. We did not want to require families to move childcare providers. We really wanted that structure for the children who were being served. That's okay. And then this is some of the feedback that we've gotten from Partner Up employees and employers. And so I won't read those word for word, but the employees talked about how they wouldn't be able to be here without using Partner Up because most of their income goes toward childcare. And because of Partner Up, they have been able to buy a house, which they would not have been able to do previously. And then I will say, I think I might have skipped over this, but our model for Partner Up is that businesses are required to pay between 25% and 75% of the true cost of care. And then DCF, our department, will cover the remaining cost of care. So for the most part, we base it on that true cost of care. For example, we have $1,800 a month for a full-time infant slot. We know families are not paying that for childcare. So most of the childcare providers that we are working with are receiving an influx of funding for those slots that they are then able to put into quality, assisting with teacher salary, teacher raises, things like that. And then the employer there also states that they're incredibly grateful for the childcare funding and partnership. It's really been an investment into the infrastructure of the childcare community, and that it's been an incredible opportunity for staff and community members. Andrea, I think I'll pass it back to you.
Thank you, Tina. All right. So I'm going to talk briefly about the Dream Up Grant program to support innovation and growth in communities. And so this is really trying to address a lot of those childcare desert challenges that I mentioned that we face in the state, but also addressing the needs of some of those subpopulations that have a much more difficult time finding quality childcare, even in communities where there is ample supply. So this is really about supply building of childcare, creating new childcare businesses in communities. Communities can be as small as a neighborhood in some of our urban areas or one zip code, and as large as a county. But that's how we allow communities to self-define, and depending on how they're organized, what different agencies have a history of collaborating and interacting with each other, we allow them to build on that foundation that they may have already in place and try to pull together a community to apply for this grant, and allow them to pursue both new childcare business as well as expansion of existing providers, some free training for their local providers, as well as business supports, leadership development, and some $5,000 stipends for every existing childcare who completes a 6-session training to develop a business plan. So really looking at that business sustainability piece around childcare. And around the state, you see a similar map to what Tina showed, that we have awarded 12 communities that started work last May and have now been in the process of submitting their budgets and getting approval to receive a $75,000 allocation that allows them to kickstart projects and work on expansion of childcare in their community. So most of the communities have 2 or 3 goals, working with our partners at First Children's Finance, who help to facilitate this process, and they've guided those communities towards 2, 3, sometimes 4 or 5 goals that they will work on, and shoring up the pipeline of workforce coming into childcare, expanding existing childcare, and in many cases opening new childcare. We just kicked off another 16 communities in late October into November, and we will accept applications in February of 2023 for a 3rd cohort. The first 2 cohorts were funded by Preschool Development Grant, and the 3rd one will be And so the impacts so far of these 28 communities, we've had 70 providers to date, but that is about to increase substantially. And by end of next year, we expect somewhere in the neighborhood of 600 to 700 providers will have benefited from the trainings that are offered to them and the stipends that they receive for participating in this program. And here you see a quote about the economic development that really is able to be advanced within a community, lifting all boats, for example. And this grant is bringing about $300,000 into a very small rural community. That's huge. It's a fantastic win-win. So it's bringing in new money to start new programs, but also expanding and sustaining the existing ones. So here are some examples of the work that the first 12 communities have focused on so far. So some of them are doing some more evaluation of need and looking at community and employer surveys and events to help learn more and increase the awareness among businesses and other potential contributors about the local childcare needs and how they might consider investing in it. They are working to build the childcare workforce, like I mentioned, to reopen classrooms that are closed due to lack of staffing. They're engaging high school students in coursework to become providers as soon as they graduate. They're supporting in-home family providers in enhancing and growing their programs, opening new childcare centers, and doing that in strategic partnerships. So we aren't replicating old business models that we know do not serve anyone, not the families, not the programs or the workforce. So we are looking for community investment, and finally, identifying potential resources and asking for more support from state and local leaders. So once these communities come together in these cross-sector tables where they are able to brainstorm and plan, they also find that they build relationships and are able to leverage those relationships and their messaging to really help make a case for their local leadership to buy in to further investment. So we'll skip right over that and provide you with the website, which I believe was already provided for you in the chat. And thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you, Andrea. Thank you, Tina. Incredible plethora of information from all 4 of our states. I know we always try to provide as much information as possible, and we don't give enough time or credit to our states to really report out the incredible work that is going on. So right now, I know in the agenda, you're supposed to have a 10-minute break, but what we're going to do is we're going to take a 5-minute break, but we're going to also encourage you to get up, stretch, move, do whatever you need to do before coming back into the next session, in which we will have Jenna Conway from Virginia talk about their efforts in building a statewide early childhood system. So please go ahead and take a 5-minute break at this time, and we will see you back here at 5 after the hour. Thank you. Hello, everyone. I know that was a very quick break, so I hope you've got all your needs met during that time. Today, I'm excited to introduce you to Jenna Conway, who is the Deputy Superintendent at the Virginia Department of Education and leads the Division of Early Childhood Care and Education. She is going to spend her time today talking to us about the statewide efforts that Virginia is making in coordinating early childhood programs across the system. So I am going to go ahead and hand it over to Jenna.
Wonderful. Thank you, Judy. And it's great to be here this afternoon. I know some of you had the opportunity to hear from some of my colleagues from Virginia. I see former colleagues from Louisiana on here as well, and just really pleased to be here and appreciate you inviting me. I realize I'm also probably one of the last presentations and a very full week, and just glad to share some insights on how we have worked to unify the early childhood system here in Virginia. I'm starting to share my slides. Is that popping up there, hopefully, as we look at our efforts here in Virginia. So what I thought I'd start with was our true north, our goal around school readiness and how that continues to organize and drive our work, how that led to a unified vision for early childhood, talk a little bit about access as well as quality, how we systematically use data to increase impact, and then some of our insights from PDG and how we've used the Preschool Development Grant Birth to 5 to help further our work. So when we talk about unification and the efforts in recent years in Virginia, we always try to start with our true north, which is making sure that every child in the Commonwealth of Virginia has the opportunity to come to school ready. In Virginia, we use a kindergarten entry assessment, both actually at the beginning and the end of the kindergarten year, for all roughly 95,000 children that enter kindergarten each year. And as you see in this chart, we know that still too many kids, just about 42% of our children come in not ready in at least one of 4 areas, either early literacy, math, self-regulation, or social skills. And you'll note that we've got equal weighting for academics, literacy, and math as we do for our social emotional skills, really meaning that we've got to continue to systematically look at what experiences children and their families have prior to kindergarten and what we can do to strengthen those experiences. I'll also note, as you'll see here, we've seen the most significant setbacks in the academic areas since the pandemic. And so, for example, sort of roughly just over 20,000 kindergartners are coming in at serious risk of reading failure. We also track our kids throughout the system, and we know that kids who come into kindergarten less ready, particularly in literacy and math, are much less likely to come to hit the end of 3rd grade when all of the standardized assessments start and be on level.
Excuse me, Jenna.
Yeah.
Excuse me. We're seeing your presenter slides. If you want to put it into slideshow mode.
Does that work? Did it switch over?
There you go. Perfect. Thank you.
All right. So, and a part of what we're really focused in Virginia is it's not just about sort of overall readiness, but looking at who of our children are historically underrepresented and whether or not they have equitable opportunity to come to school ready. And so you see with the numbers on this slide that we need to strengthen our system to make sure that all kids, regardless of zip code or background, have the opportunity to come to school ready. So a disproportionate number of our Black and Hispanic students come in unready, as well as our students from low income background, our English language learners, and our children with special needs. In a more optimistic note, part of why we're so focused on building a system that prepares all kids is we know that our programs can make a difference. And so when we look at Virginia data, we see that kids from low-income families who have the opportunity to have a high-quality public preschool experience are more likely to come in ready than their peers. We, in response to this, really said, okay, if the goal is making sure that all children have the opportunity to come to school ready, let's break the problem down into sort of discrete pieces. And what we realized we needed to do in order to make sure that all kids come to school ready, we had to systematically think about where are the kids who are least likely to come to school ready, and what experiences are they receiving or not receiving prior to kindergarten? So really, as I'll talk in future slides about thinking about both access, choice, and enrollment, as well as quality. And we realized that it would just be impossible for us here in Virginia to do that if we were working across multiple agencies at the local, regional, and state level. We worked very closely with stakeholders across the state, conducted listening sessions, heard from folks, worked with both sides of the aisle in our legislature, as well as our governor at the time, to pass a law just before the pandemic, thank goodness, that required Virginia to establish a statewide unified public-private early childhood care and education system under the Board of Education and the Department of Education. It moved everything related to birth to 5 care and education out of the home. So everything from family childcare, Head Start collaboration, licensing, childcare subsidy, early childhood special education to the DOE. It also required us to establish a new measurement and improvement system. We call that VQB5. So we can think about where all of our kids are being served, how we measure and understand the quality of the experiences, so we can support the improvement across the board, as well as standing up an early childhood advisory committee so we could make sure that stakeholders, including our families, our practitioners, our advocates, our pediatricians, are all at the table as we think about building the system over time. With that law, we've been working to unify the system since 2020, while also managing a global pandemic. And it basically enables us to create this vision for as I noted before, kind of making progress towards our true north, making sure all kids have the opportunity to come to school ready. As you see, that is, it entails we have to think about access and choice. We have to think about how we fund programs. We have to think about measurement and improvement. And ultimately, we've got to figure out how we continually use data to make sure that our system is improving. This gives a little bit more detail on the various facets of the work. And again, it's much more than just kind of quality measurement and improvement in our QRAS. We're thinking about access and choice, and I'll talk a little bit about that in a second. We're thinking about system-wide measurement and quality improvement, really with a focus on teacher-child interactions and curriculum. We're making sure families are at the table as children's first educators, and thinking about at the state, regional, and local level, how we're engaging them in their children's development, learning, and well-being. We're in charge of health and safety, thinking about what that looks like, not only for schools, but when we run our licensing program for all of the thousands of family childcare and childcare centers. And then we're really thinking about regional capacity and innovation. How do we have a unified vision at the state level, execute that consistently across our 132 school divisions, communities, and cities, from our urban areas to our suburban areas to our rural areas, but also make sure there's enough flexibility for innovation, something that was really important for the PDG grant as we move forward. This is a more simplified version of this vision. And again, you have to be in charge of the major levers. You have to set the policies for health, safety, and learning. You have to be in charge of making sure you can fund the programs or work with your legislature to set the funding rates for preschool, for mixed delivery preschool, for childcare subsidy. And you have to think about, okay, how do we then sort of use the resources like the block grant, like the PDG, to then make progress against strategic goals, whether that's quality measurement and improvement, whether that's adjusting the workforce. But distilling it down, here's how we sort of describe it. We know in order to make sure that more kids in Virginia have the opportunity to come to school ready, we've got to address access, quality, and choice. Like, absolutely has to happen. Make sure that more kids are eligible for and have opportunities to participate in early childhood programming across settings: family childcare, early Head Start, faith-based preschools, childcare centers, schools, early childhood special education. We know if we can give more choices to more families, and that those programs are continually improving. So any family can choose a program and they can know that it's of a certain level of quality and improving over time. That's how we'll drive across the board, no matter where you go in Virginia, improve school readiness outcomes. Here's a little bit more detail on how we think about access and choice in Virginia. Lots of words on the slide, but you see why it's important that we're in charge of both thinking about those health, safety, and learning expectations and funding programs to meet those levels. You'll see our kind of strategy embodied here with a real focus across our programs: preschool in the public setting, preschool in the private setting, childcare subsidy, looking at across the board where the programs we can, and we can't set funding rates for Head Start, but the programs we can, how do we fund programs to meet our learning expectations, right? Rather than using market-based measures, or other approaches. And that's really important that we're not only doing that for one program, but across the board, so that we have more equitable and fair funding across the board. A big piece of that is assuming higher compensation for teachers, particularly in childcare, so that we can slow down turnover, support the hiring of top talent, and start to see that play out in terms of the interaction scores we'll see in our programs. So you'll see that basing funding across the board on the true cost of care. This is relatively new work that we're doing in Virginia out of the last year and a half, but calculating the rate per slot using the actual cost and assuming competitive compensation, which is really, really important. We're also not only just creating a differential for infants and toddlers, but going up to the true cost based on the ratios and the competitive compensation. So significantly higher, much more than $1 per hour, $1 per day. We're making sure that we're growing our access in our community-based settings, whether it's public preschool, whether that's our community childcare subsidy programs. We're looking at across the board how we expand state pre-K to be for 3 and 4-year-olds, so we have a cumulative 2-year experience prior to school, and then continuing to make more families eligible as we think about which kids don't have the opportunity to come to school ready, and using our wait list strategically to demonstrate to our elected officials, our stakeholders, our chambers of commerce, and others, this is the unmet family demand. Here's what this means in terms of growing our programs over time. Pre-pandemic, we were about 20,000 kids in our childcare subsidy. Thanks to these changes around eligibility and funding and a real promotion of growth, even though we've raised the bar, as I'll talk about in a second, in terms of higher quality expectations for our programs that take public subsidy, we've gone from 20,000 kids on childcare subsidy in February of 2020 to currently we're about 37,000 children on childcare subsidy. We've also grown our state pre-K as well as our mixed delivery state pre-K in private settings by over 60% over the last few years. So really dramatic growth on access and choice, but also continuing to keep focused on quality. And we know that we don't want to present this as a binary. So making sure that we are thinking about what quality looks like in a thoughtful way across all of our diverse settings. VQB5 is our new required measurement and improvement system. We are in our second practice year of rolling it out and helping familiarize the field with it. So it's for family childcare, it's for early Head Start, our childcare centers, faith-based preschool, all of our schools, as well as any childcare that receives public funding has to be part of VQB5. And we've tried to kind of intentionally roll that out really since using the PDG a few years ago to begin to pilot and scale this. We're going to focus on interactions and curriculum. And so what that really means is we'll be using the class across several thousand classrooms, as well as creating lists of approved curriculum and beginning to support all of our programs to use it. And this kind of gives a little bit of our model for change here and why we want to get down to every single classroom. We're less worried about funding sort of type or building type or program, and really focus on how do we get into every classroom, support every educator or set of educators in that classroom to understand what their strengths are, where the gaps are, what we can do to support improvement. And that's really, really important as you think about how we support this cycle of individualized feedback and support for improvement. So this kind of describes our cycle from preparing our educators before their classrooms are observed, measuring and improving, giving them feedback to grow, and then aligning our resources. So we think about mental health consultation, coaching, professional development, training, credentialing, aligning all of that based on what the data tells us about what Virginia educators need, where they're strong and where the gaps are. And then we revisit it each year. We revisit it at the state level using data, at the regional level, and at the program level. Put another way, this is how we use data to drive improvement. And again, building the data infrastructure, we call our new system Link B5 to capture experiences down to the classroom level, to understand and capture what children are in those classrooms. And then over time, to understand how the quality factors affiliated with those classrooms then tracks with growth and outcomes over time. I think this is really important. Our children in Virginia are going to be affiliated with classroom experiences, not just the funding source or the type of building they're in. We'll be able to kind of look at their class scores, the turnover rate, the curriculum use, the teacher credential, the compensation, all of the factors that we know about those classrooms, and then look at how the kids grow within the year, because we measure our 3 and our 4-year-olds, as well as connect that to longitudinal data. So they're, where they are at kindergarten entry, where they're at 3rd grade. And then as we've seen some of the most powerful evidence, whether it's the Perry preschool or Head Start, being able to kind of capture some of the life outcomes as well, because we've captured this data down to the classroom level for our infants, toddlers, 3 and 4-year-olds. Even in the immediate, before we can capture all that longitudinal data, I wanted just to give an example of how we're immediately using data to inform improvement. So as we rolled out curriculum or rolled out our sort of quality measurement and improvement system here in Virginia, we were capturing, we set up a process to review curriculum. We had 30 plus options at the time, and we wanted to know which programs were using curriculum and which weren't. Our first year, it showed us that, wow, 2/3 of programs using improved curriculum. Great, that's a strength. We also saw, however, that a third were not using curriculum. So gosh, we have to tackle that. When we dug a little deeper, however, we saw that the differences by program type were really significant, right? That nearly all of our public schools, and this is even higher now, we're using curriculum, as were nearly all of our Head Starts. And our Head Starts are in here, reflected both in public schools and in our child care centers. But then you look at our child care centers that are not Head Start and our family day homes, and you see that drops significantly, right? Just over half of our child care centers are using approved curriculum, and fewer than half of our family child care programs. And so that allowed us to then target our efforts to make sure that we would help get access to curriculum for our child care centers and our family day homes. Again, only by having all of this data in one place, measuring it consistently across the board for all of our programs that take public dollars, are we able to kind of get this data and then do something about this. So we've not only continued to grow the list of approved curriculum, but Virginia has made an investment in an open educational resource, or a free birth to 5 curriculum that was made available to all of these programs, as well as investing in some training and technical assistance that will be prioritized for our family childcare and our childcare center. So just an example of how we're using this data to understand where the gaps are, to then develop innovative solutions to solve that, particularly for our historically underserved programs, or those that tend to have fewer resources, like our family childcare and some of our childcare centers. With that, just wanted to share a couple of insights from PDG before wrapping this up. But key points that we learned as we sort of brought folks together to apply for and implement the preschool development grant over the last few years. The first one you heard at the beginning, and you heard me echo throughout. What is your goal? What is your true north? We are continually and constantly focused on school readiness in Virginia, and using that to organize our work, whether it was our strategic plan or needs assessment, our piloting in the field, really important. We use the federal funds to focus on innovation. One of the really unique things, and you've heard probably some of my colleagues talk about, is looking at a really unique educator incentive, using the PDG to do a randomized control trial, demonstrate that it worked, and then took that back to state elected officials to get funding. And what went from a small program that offered $1,500 a year is now a $25 to $30 million program that serves, I think, over 12,000 educators. So just a huge opportunity that kind of came from a small pilot that we funded with PDG. We've also used PDG to build partnerships across sectors, public-private partnerships with foundations and other groups, as well as research policy partnerships. There's no way we at the Department of Education could have done an RCT. We needed an outside higher education entity to support us with that. We also use PDG to not only think about the innovations, but to make sure we always had a plan for getting to scale, as we thought about what it would take to implement the law and make it happen over time. And last but not certainly not least, making sure that, and it is called for in PDG, and we not only did it in order to have a competitive application, but tried to bake it into our activities across the board, making sure we were continually engaging stakeholders, deepening our engagement of family, looking at who was least sort of resourced and most disconnected, and how do we bring them to the table and help them shape the policy and practice as we went from a small set of community networks and pilots in 2019 to now what is a statewide transformation with a common goal of making sure that every child in the Commonwealth has the opportunity to come to school ready. With that, I will stop sharing, if we can do that, and come back and see. I think there's any for questions.
I think we have 1 or 2 minutes for some questions if anyone wants to put it in the chat. Oh, interesting. Okay, thanks, Sarah. So apparently the chat has been shut down. So my apologies in not recognizing that. But Jenna, I want to thank you so much for this incredible view of how you can transform and align your early childhood systems and things like that. I think the thing that caught me that seems appropriate at this time is how you said, and given the new round of funding that's about to go out, how you said utilizing federal funds to focus on innovation, and we have an incredible opportunity across our states to do that now. So thank you for those thoughts and those words, and I hope our partners in our states and our PDG grantees and new awardees will take that to heart. So what we're going to do now, very quickly, I'm going to let you know it's a little different than it's been for the last 2 days. We're going to take a quick 10-minute break, more than 5 minutes. And then after the break, you will again go back into your attendee hub in CVent. In your schedule, again, you should see your 6 separate sessions listed for state team time by ACF regions. Make sure to look for the region that your state is listed under and join that session. You will then go into your regional sessions where the TA specialist will again walk you through the steps for your team time. However, as Tammy mentioned earlier today, we have a change. Instead of going back into regional groups after team time to report out, everyone will return to a large meeting room for the federal closing session. This will be a Zoom meeting room, and you will be able to unmute yourselves and fully interact with the presenters and the federal staff that will be speaking at that time. When the federal closing session starts, some of you will be asked to volunteer to share your highlights from the convening before the federal team shares some of their own thoughts about the convening and shares a look ahead for the new year and attempts to answer questions you might have at this point in time. I'm sure we know what some of those questions may be, but anything else that you may have questions about during the convening, we hope to try and address during that time, as well as some of the topics that we did not discuss during this convening. So at this point in time, we're going to go ahead and take a 10-minute break and come back and join your regional groups.